PBS Hawaiʻi, supported by viewers like you. It's not just TV, it's magic. PBS Hawaiʻi, home is here.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and the Pacific since 1857, making a positive difference in the communities where we live and work. Electric bikes are a convenient, eco-friendly, and affordable way to get around, and more of them are showing up on Hawaii's roads and sidewalks. But with that growth comes concerns. Accidents, unclear rules, and safety risks are prompting calls for more education and enforcement. What changes need to be made to keep riders and everyone else safe? Join the discussion next on Insights.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi. I'm Yanji Denise. Electric bicycles, or e-bikes, seem to be everywhere these days. A growing number of Hawaii residents are turning to them as an affordable, fast, and environmentally friendly way to get around. But with that growth comes some serious concerns, especially when it comes to safety. From crowded sidewalks to accidents involving young riders, Hawaii is trying to catch up to a trend that is moving faster than safety rules can be made. So what needs to happen to make e-bikes safer for everyone? We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaiʻi.org and on the PBS Hawaiʻi YouTube page. Now to our guests. Darius Kila is the State House representative for District 44, which includes Honokaihale, Nānākuli, and Māʻili. He won the seat in 2022 and currently serves as the chair of the House Committee on Transportation. Matt Weyer represents Honolulu's Council District 2, which includes Waikele, Wahiawa, the entire North Shore, down the windward side to Kahaluʻu. He also was elected in 2022 and serves as the chair of the Housing, Sustainability, Economy, and Health Committee. Major James Slayter has 28 years of service in the Honolulu Police Department and is currently the commander of the Traffic Division. He previously headed the Vehicular Homicide Section at HPD. And Travis Counsell is the executive director of the Hawaii Bicycling League, a nonprofit that advocates for safer streets. He helped to start the Bike Ed program, which educates youth about bike safety. Thank you all for being here tonight. Travis, I want to start with you and get a little language about what we're talking about, because when we think about e-bikes, we are starting to see so many different kinds of motorized vehicles on one wheel, on two wheels, out on the road. When we say e-bike, what do we mean?
I think it depends if you're talking about legally or in the public face. So I think e-bike and the term electric bicycle has kind of come to mean so many different things, as you've said. And that's one thing at Hawaii Bicycling League that we've worked not only at the city and the state to come up with better definitions. And it'll take some time and public education to make sure that those meet the public definitions. But really, a lot of the devices that are two wheels, powered by electricity, are being called an e-bike. And I think, thankfully, with the HPDs and the City Council and Legislature, we're starting to have a better definition of really what actually is an electric bicycle versus some of these more electric devices.
And those electric devices, are they falling under the regulations that we're going to get to a little bit later tonight?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that technology, especially the new technology, didn't fit into the old definitions, old regulations, and needed some updates. So there were definitely these kind of unknown, or not really gray zones because they weren't defined, but just devices out there that needed some updates. And I'm thankful we have some of those hopefully being signed in later this year.
Okay, Major, what are we talking about when it comes to safety here? How dangerous or how risky are these vehicles to use?
Well, when you're talking about what we said with e-bikes, they're actually a very good mode of transportation. They're actually very safe. But it all comes down to, no matter what mode of transportation you're using, it comes down to your personal responsibility and your ability to operate it safely, right? So it's the rider. It's not necessarily the device itself. Additionally, I would say, like Travis mentioned, we're lumping all these other devices into the term e-bike, right? So when we get calls for complaints, we're saying, hey, there's e-bikes, they're popping wheelies, they're riding dangerously. Then we take a look at it, those are not e-bikes, right? Those are like basically electric motorcycles. But the problem was, technology advanced so quickly, law didn't keep up with it. right? We're lucky that this year we're able to work with Rep. Kila, and he was able to push some stuff through, which is tremendous. That's the framework we needed, right? And so this foundation is going to help us with enforcement, but also with public education to try and get everybody to be safe.
Okay, let's talk about some of that legislation, starting with the city and then go to the state. Councilman Weyer, tell us about what you passed in council and what you think it will do.
Yeah, I mean, so we had a couple bills that passed that got introduced last year. Bill 52, Councilmember Tolba with Councilmember Santos Tam introduced that. That was legislation to try to restrict these higher powered, we'll call them electric bikes, right? We'll talk through, I'm sure, all the different nuance. Also put some restrictions on stunts. Bill 61, the floor leader Cordero and myself introduced, really was just looking at trying to target the wheelies that are going on in the community. It was an idea that came from the community. Of course, with the city, traffic laws, a lot of the stuff we do is bound by the state traffic code, and so that's why I'm so grateful for Representative for Darius's work on the bill. Right, I think for us it's figuring out how do we provide a tool, in the toolkit, particularly for HPD, not overcomplicate their job. I think sometimes our legislation makes it harder, sometimes it makes it better. That's why I think Mayor setting up the working group was so great to bring folks together and have that conversation, right? I think ultimately, if we're looking at legislation, right, we want to craft it in a way that's clear, that's simple, easy for officers to cite, and then easy for it to go through the court process without any barriers. And of course, I think a big part of what the city can do is education, education of the community. We started work on that last year with the community policing team getting into our schools, and they're continuing to do that. And when you look at what other communities are dealing with, across the US, right, we're seeing this e-bike problem. But of course, when you look at Europe, where they're all over too, they have less of a problem because there's much more investment in the infrastructure, right? And so I think that's why also the complete streets, better bike lanes is a part of that as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Representative Kila, tell us about what happened at the state. There is now legislation on the governor's desk that will likely go into law.
Probably the most comprehensive bill I've worked on since getting elected. It's 22 pages in its final form. But it's literally, I think, the manifestation of the working group that the council put together, but also just the public's largest concerns. Right? As I'm looking at the bill now, it's a HD2, SD2, CD1. So I went through 2 different House version revisions, 2 Senate revisions for us to come to a conference draft revision. 5 different mock-ups, because even throughout the session, the bill changed from its first inception. And we only have so much time at the legislature, and this was the one time we had to catch the lightning in the bottle. So it transformed from 16 pages to 22 pages, but it's I think what we need, it's the foundation. I think a lot of folks are asking for, the biggest thing is like they want these folks to be insured, they want licensure requirements, but we need the foundation first before you put up the drywall in the house, I'll say.
Okay, so in those 22 pages, what is the sort of core foundation that you're establishing here?
Largely, I gotta give credit to the council because they took the first cracks when they said they wanted to put the prohibition on stunts. And I felt terrible for them, right? The public was like, you folks are trying to over-regulate. But they did take the first crack for that because now that's literally, I look at the first page, it defines safe riding behaviors and it prohibits these stunts in the traffic code. There's an exemption for parades, obviously folks will do those safely, but that's the foundation of it. And to what we're talking about, or what an e-bike is and what it's not, it's classified here as a high-speed electric device that exceeds 750 watts, that is not designed for legal road usage. Because the hard part is you don't want to confine advancement, but you have to also reel it in for what it's not. So it can still allow the advancement of electric motorcycles, electric mopeds, because I don't want to hurt those operators. But we're looking at those Surons, those vehicles that look like e-bikes, they're not. And I think if one thing for the public watching, we have to know what it is and what it's not. And there's a provision in the bill that it gives the county 6 months to work with the operators to actually start what's going to be noticed like labeling requirements of a class 1, class 2, class 3 e-bike, that they need to be labeled accordingly. Because this will now let HPD know if you don't have the label, it's not road legal. So that's just parts of the bill.
Yeah, how much easier will that make your job to have those kinds of definitions so that you can actually figure out how to enforce?
Tremendous. I can't wait till the governor signs it and it goes into law. We're excited about it, and it's not just I don't want to give it the wrong impression like we want to enforce and give citations or anything like that. It's, the current language that's in state law combined with the council's recent updates, I think there's still some confusion for the consumer, right? For the parents out there that are thinking what can they and what can't they buy for their children, what's safe, what's not safe, how fast can this go? Like really just having this will give us an opportunity to go out and kind of revamp our public safety messaging, right? To go out into the schools and start teaching them what the new law is. We can put out PSAs through social media. It's going to be a big, in the beginning, it's not going to be a big, hey, we're out to enforce. It's going to be, we're out to educate.
Okay, let's go back to those definitions because I feel like you know exactly what these are. So we're talking about 3 different classes, basically, of motorized bicycles. But how fast do these go? And if they fall into a different category, does that then mean that those vehicles can go in traffic? Like, how does that work?
That's a great question. So we have 3 classes of electric bicycles. And then I would say there's kind of a 4th definition for all those things outside of a bicycle. So Class 1, 2, and 3, it's a national, there's 40 some odd states that have adopted this at this point. A Class 1 can go up to 20 miles an hour, just pedal assist, so where you're just pedaling and it's giving you a little boost. A Class 2, also 20 mile an hour maximum, but it might have a throttle as well as those operable pedals. So you see those a lot in those, maybe the ones from Costco or something where it has that throttle. A Class 3 is a little more of a commuter style bike. It does go up to 28 miles an hour. Again, can be ridden at slower speeds and just pedal assist as well. So really, you know, what we define as a electric bicycle, it has operable pedals. That's the first key thing. And goes either 20 or 28 depending on those definitions. And those are subclasses of a bicycle. So they have the same rights, rules as a bicycle out there on the roadways.
So those ones should be in the bike lane?
Bike lane, yes, correct. Yeah, they should be treated
or in traffic.
Or in traffic if there's not a bike facility. And in certain residential areas, they might be permitted on the sidewalk at low speeds, those types of things. And this defines all of that in there as well. And then that outside class, that high-speed electric device is really, as Major said, anything above that 750 watts. Really, anything that goes above 28 miles an hour. If it's not a motorcycle, if it's not a moped, those really kind of say, hey, these don't belong on the roads unless they can meet those definitions of a moped or a motorcycle.
Okay, and Major, I want to ask you, what about these vehicles that, or these, I don't know what they call them, devices that I see? You know, I live downtown, I see people on what looks like a unicycle. It's just a single wheel and a big motorcycle helmet, and they're just speeding like Tron down the road. And I think as a driver, it's scary. As a cyclist, I think it would be scary. And then I don't want them on the sidewalk. Or you have those stand-up scooters that are motorized, and you know, there was this back and forth between Lime came to our community for a little while, and then they're gone. But there is some kind of a rental, these black ones that I see discarded on the sidewalk. What are those?
So the unicycles that you were mentioning, so those are like micro mobility devices, right? So luckily now we're going to have that as a definition as well in the law. That will allow the county to go ahead and say where they want those to operate or not operate, where it's going to be legal, right? So once they have that, we're going to be able to use those definitions. Sadly, and just to take you back, I don't want to get too far into it, but in 2021 is when we started first seeing some tragedies occurring with all of these types of devices. That was the year we had 1 fatality from each one of these types of classes. We had the first one, which was a Suron. It was in the Ewa Beach area, driving at a high rate of speed, hits a curve, flies up, kills a pedestrian. And that was the first tragedy. And admittedly, as a police department, we showed up. I was there, and we're trying to figure out, what is this device, right? Like, it's not a bicycle. It doesn't have pedals. Right? And so here we are Googling, you're trying to figure out what's the power on this, like, and then you're doing a horsepower to watt conversion to figure out where it falls in the HRS as far as a vehicle, right? And then that's how we're going to categorize whether this is a negligent homicide or, trying to define what crime occurred, right? And then later on in the year, we had an actual e-bike, right, where somebody lost control, was ejected onto the roadway, no helmet, passed away. Right? And then finally, we had one of those exact devices that you're talking about, which is a unicycle, right? It's an electric unicycle. And it was on the viaduct, of all places, where people are traveling at 60, 65 miles per hour. It was in the right shoulder, and this individual hit something in the roadway, he was ejected, or just lost control and was ejected into the roadway where an oncoming vehicle ran him over, and no helmet, right? So another tragedy. So it was at that point where, like, wow, we've got all these new devices, and they've just become much, much more popular over time. And so, like I said, it was really about trying to get the right laws in place to have definitions so that we knew what we had, but also what the community would know what we have out there.
We've got some questions for the community. I'll put these around, and if you're not the right person to answer them, then we can keep it moving. But someone from Pro City and Councilmember, if you would take this one. Do e-bike riders need a driver's license, or is there an age requirement to meet? What are the rules in terms of being allowed to use these?
Yeah, so I'll defer on the updates to the law. It was 16 was the law before, I think.
Yeah, currently you have to be 15 years old
Yeah,
to operate a low-speed electric bicycle on our roadways. You don't need a license, but when you're talking about the vehicles like the Surons, where it's the equivalent of an electric motorcycle, if it's road legal, you would need a Type 2 license.
You know, but these electric bicycles, I mean, you can go to any big box store, they sell them. Representative Kila, I mean, what are your concerns for parents out there? You got Christmas or birthdays and, you know, they want to get the latest thing for their kid?
The concerning part, though, for me, right, is that you need an adult to purchase this because these are not cheap, right? They're not your normal retro rider red bike. These are expensive things. But that was the hard balance we had to fight because you don't want to be so tough that nobody can ride it, but you don't want to be too lenient that everyone's riding it. So with the provisions of the Class 1, 2, and 3, we even loosened up on the fact that you can be a Class 2 rider under 14 without parental permission, but that Class 3 under 18 you need a parental, under 16 you need parental supervision. And on all of those you need to have either a guardian or parent present, and it's putting that responsibility on them. And even as I'm looking on page 4, when you are now purchasing this e-bike, whether it's online or in person, the burden of responsibility is now put onto the purchaser, that they now are going to say that they had these read to them, they know what the rules of the road is. So when HPD is now doing their job, there cannot be the argument, I didn't know.
So even if you're the parent and you've given it to a teenager who's out there doing whatever they're doing, you're the one who's actually legally
and
responsible.
one part I didn't get to talk about is that we've looped it in the registration requirement now for these e-bikes. Because what HPD has to do is deal with a lot of theft. But largely too, if you're not registered and it's not if it's not legally registered, it's not legally allowed to be on the roadway. And so the hard part that they'll be dealing with is trying to figure out how to get them off. And there's a provision in the bill that allows them in circumstances for temporary seizure of these e-bikes that are not e-bikes, right? These illegal Surons.
This is an interesting one, Travis, and I know that you do a lot of teaching. You know, we ask folks on Instagram how we can make these more safe, and Chrissy says, require mandatory safety classes for everyone owning or riding e-bikes. We need proper information on usage. What's interesting is that you have people who are interacting on the road with cars who may not be licensed drivers, and so they don't understand the rules of the road. It's not intuitive for a kid, and they don't necessarily know that taking a left and waiting for traffic or you know, obeying traffic signs. So is there any program to require safety classes? Should that be mandatory?
Yeah, so on the education front in general, we, Hawaii Bicycling League, offer 4th grade education, regular bike, not electric bike education, to teach kids the kind of the safety with the goal of them being able to ride to school if the parents are comfortable with that. And we've been doing that for 35 plus years. 100,000 students have gone through that. And more recently, we've partnered with DOT and offer an e-bike safety class. We have 12 different types of e-bikes. You can come see what a cargo bike and all these different. And the main goal there is to give you the skills and the knowledge, especially in how these are different than regular bikes. The extra power, the extra weight, they definitely handle differently. And the core things to all of that is the rights and rules of the road. You know, bikes have every right to be on the road, the same rules, responsibilities as somebody driving a vehicle. But like you said, if you don't know those rules, we want to make sure that we can provide those. And these are all free classes available to the public, thanks to grants from both the city and the state. So yeah, I don't know about mandating that to be on a bike. That might be a barrier to the entry to getting people on bikes that we wouldn't really support. But I do think everybody should seek out that education for their own safety, let alone the community's safety.
And to that question that we were dealing with at the legislature, all these people want to do insurance requirements, licensure requirements. But I mean, if I could tell the public anything, I go back to you need the foundation to build the drywall for the house, right? So this is our first step because moped riders actually need a license, right? But because their license for theirs only expires every year, if you would put that onto an e-bike rider, it puts a barrier to ridership. But motorcycle riders are tier 2 licensed people, but you don't want to make e-bike folks have to go through that because then they actually need to do a motor course, and what if they don't have a car? So I mean, we did try, but I think right now, it's just we can't do it until we get this going.
Right, and one thing that is mandated, Councilman, is the helmets, and that can make a huge difference. Why was that so important to you?
I mean, honestly, we've seen it in the community. I mean, Sergeant has all the stats, but I can just speak to instances where we had youth that had to have reconstructive surgery because of the accidents that have happened, let alone the deaths, right, that we've seen in the community. That was part of the bill, increasing it up to 18. I know Darius's bill has that as well. I mean, ultimately, everyone should be wearing a helmet, right? If you're on a bike, on a motorcycle, on a moped, it's really a safety issue, right? And it's not. I mean, folks do get riled up sometimes when laws get passed and they feel like government's over-regulating, but really, when you're looking at the impact on the community and wanting to protect our youth, I mean, that's really where we have to start, right? And understanding, making sure they understand how to be safe. And even in the e-bike conversation, another thing that's come up is just this confusion, because dirt bikes show up on the road a lot, right? Like maybe in certain parts of the island, we see a lot of e-bikes. Some parts of our community, I'll see dirt bikes doing those wheelies and everything, and those shouldn't even be on the road at all, right, Sergeant? So I think more education, the better, right? And I think that's what our community wants and needs.
Yeah, and if I could ask you this, Gwen says, bike lanes are for all bikes, e-bikes, and pedal bikes. Sound an audible bell or horn when overtaking coming from behind other bikes, people, walkers, runners. Sidewalks are for walkers and runners. I think that that's something that, you know, I've seen just, I mean, this is obviously anecdotal, but that you see people who are driving or riding e-bikes or some of those other devices that we talked about on the sidewalk. That seems quite dangerous for pedestrians.
Right. So, I mean, there's already current state law that prohibits you from operating a low-speed electric bicycle on the sidewalk. Bicyclists are allowed on sidewalks in residential areas, not in the business districts, but you still have to yield to pedestrians. There's still a section in that law for that. You cannot exceed 10 miles per hour. There's a lot of regulations and rules that are already in place. It's nice that this is like a one-stop shop, has all the language in there in one place, so it's easy to see and understand. Ultimately, everybody has to share the road, whether it's pedestrians, bicyclists, cars, right? So we have to find a way to all cohesively work together to commute to wherever we're trying to go. Right, so it's ultimately coming down to each one's personal responsibility.
What are the penalties for all of this?
Everything varies, right? So it would be, for me to like list off all the different penalties, we'd be here all night. Yeah. It's gonna start from a low fine to a high fine. It's all gonna be dependent on which section of the HRS or the ROH that you violated.
From the sidewalk conversation, I think one key thing we note is most people ride on the sidewalk because they feel unsafe on the road. So it's usually not because they want to be dangerous or cause issues. And in a lot of situations, riding on the sidewalk is actually more dangerous. You're unpredictable. Drivers might not expect you there, that type of stuff. But with that conversation, increased bike lanes, paths, protected infrastructure, and giving kind of that division between the things with wheels that might be moving differently than a car, but not people walking. Having a defined space as best as possible. There's places that we can't, unfortunately, but there's so many places that we could add bike lanes or other facilities that would remove those people from the sidewalks that would feel comfortable riding in a protected bike lane or something, and make the people walking feel safer.
And we added it now in Chapter 291C that it prohibits explicitly motorcycle use and moped use for bike lanes, because those bike lanes are for bicyclists. And I think a lot of the times they're not going in these bike lanes because it's unpredictable. So now it's outlined clearly who is allowed in, and we do legally allow in the bill for Class 1 and Class 2 to operate on the sidewalks, but clearly Class 3 cannot.
Okay, and the difference in those classes is really just the speed of the...
It is the speed, but I think one problem we're going to face eventually is that there's the modification where the governing speed inhibitor can be removed. And so I think that's also what's happening, our folks are tampering with the e-bikes as they're sold. But I also go back to when we talk about the fine structure, what's built out in the bill is that for non-compliant sellers, distributors, and of e-bikes, whether they're legal or not, they will face a $500 penalty per day per violation.
Wow. Well, Kimo from Pacific Heights has a question about modification, so I want to keep with you on this. It says, I took an electric bike and customized it myself, so it is like an electric motorcycle. Why won't the state give us a way to register my vehicle and make it legal? This is just what happened when mopeds first came here. What do you say to Kimo?
Well, I put the same thing, Ray, is that we have the framework for reconstructed vehicles, but they still have to confine to what the intent was. They're sold a certain way because that's how they've been tested. When you go and move it from, obviously, that extra mile per hour from 28 to 29 could be life or death. But to the extent of what it's being modified to what it wasn't intended, that's the hard part. And I go back to, we are in very infant stages. But I go back to, I think it's something you can do in a in a private setting, not for the public.
Right, and if you make that modification that hasn't been road tested, you don't know what happens in a crash, right?
And largely when the definition now of sale, when you modify the vehicle from the point of sale, you now are making it non-compliant for road usage.
Okay, I want to go back to you. Mike in Hilo says, by definition, what is the difference between a bike and an electric-powered motorcycle? So is it just the pedaling part?
Yeah, it's both the wattage, so that 750 watts, which is about 1 horsepower, and those operable pedals. Those are the main difference. Anything above that 750 watts, and especially if it doesn't have a pedals, becomes that kind of electric, either motor scooter or motor-driven cycle. Yeah.
Okay. Eric in Kailua has a question that I'd love for you to take, sir. Can parents be held liable when a child does something wrong with an e-bike, either hurting themselves or someone else? Representative Kila was talking about point of sale and who actually is responsible. It seems that good parenting should be part of this issue in the first place. So, you know, we've seen some terrible cases. We saw that 7-year-old girl who lost her life. And let's say that, you know, some of those wheelies that we see, things like that, at the end, like, who do you punish?
Right. Obviously, you could go civilly, right? Should there be property damage or loss of life. Criminally, though, it would be difficult for us to go and charge the parent, right, for what the child did without their knowing, right? But I think the bill does help with having it where you have to have a parent as a guardian actually seeing you or being present while you operate these devices. So I think that's going to be helpful as well.
Yep.
I mean, Representative, I would think that given that the provisions that you're talking about, maybe that would give parents some pause when they're thinking about, should I go to Costco and buy one of these?
Well, and I'm not a lawyer, right? But if we now have it outlined in HRS that you are supposed to be supervising your child and they are operating it and something does happen, I go back to there is a case to be made in civil court that there was negligence. But I don't want to go down that route, right? Because I mean, it's funny how you talked about 2021 was Eva Beach, and just not several months ago, Eva Beach had that large ride out where it just was, I mean, just defying what we're trying to accomplish. But I think to what has changed in the public from 2021 to now is the same conversation about fireworks, is that there is just this consensus that we have to get something done.
There's a question here. This is an interesting one. Tammy in Waialua wants to know, Major, do people also use their cell phones while riding e-bikes or similar vehicles? And if so, do the laws address that as they do for using a cell phone while driving a car or walking in a crosswalk? You know, Tammy, I've seen this, and I've also seen people on mopeds who are reading their phone, which is so scary. So what are the rules of the road when it comes to cell phone usage?
So we can still cite you for a mobile electronic device. Last month was Distracted Driving Awareness Month for a national, so we just did a whole thing on that, and I could go on for an hour about distracted driving. But yeah, we can cite you for a mobile electronic device if you're operating a moped, motor scooter, one of those electric Surons, whatever. But yeah.
There's a question here from Glenn in Manoa. Aloha, Glenn. Thanks for writing in. Are there any concerns about the battery for the e-bikes and the possibilities of exploding or catching fire?
Yeah, so we actually did a great PSA series, and one of the episodes we had HFD on there to talk about battery safety, both charging and just in general battery safety if they get damaged, or really even what to look for. And a lot of the more reputable brands will have them certified and have various levels of certification. Some of the cheaper ones are more of a concern. I think we had a house fire in Kailua just last year that was using a wrong charger on one of the cheaper bikes. So it's definitely a concern. I don't think it's as, you know, it's not happening on a daily basis by any means, but it's something to be very aware of, that battery, there's a charging process, there's a procedure to ensure that it's safe to use.
Okay, and on that same point, where can we dispose of the ones we don't have use for anymore?
Yeah, so there is battery recycling. I believe there's a couple of different programs on island. There's definitely a national movement from People for Bikes to recycle these batteries. And a lot of times the manufacturers have programs.
Okay. The Major made a, referred to that swarm that we saw, and that was so troubling, all those teenagers. And there's a viewer here, Councilmember, if you could take this. What can communities do to curb swarms of teenagers on e-bikes? They weave separately or together on the streets. It's hard to keep track of all of them. They are hazardous. Certainly, I mean, as an individual, you don't necessarily want to go out and try to stop that.
No, definitely. I mean, well, of course, I think most folks know, you see illegal activity, call 911, HPD can respond, right? And they're there to do it, and so we appreciate the work that they're doing. They have challenges, right? I mean, they have to make that decision how to engage with the youth on an e-bike, right? You chase someone down and they have an accident, right? Like it could become a worse situation. But same conversation we had last year at the end of the year before Christmas time came around, was just encouraging everyone to talk to your family members, right? I mean, don't be buying your kids these, for Christmas, right? And, I don't know the exact data, but I think we all saw it spike after Christmas, and that was my fear. And I know that during the summer, we see one of the deadliest times of the year. And so that's what we're trying to, I think, head off, is ensure that that doesn't happen again. And so I think having those conversations with family members, making those decisions when you're buying gifts, I think the city and the state, right, getting into schools, educating youth, making sure parents are getting that information. I love the idea of PSAs, right? Especially now with all the technology out there, we can really pump out information cheaply, get it to the public, and get it to a diverse group of people in a way that they can digest it and understand it.
Yeah, I mean, the council member brings up a good point, because you don't necessarily want to engage in high-speed chase with a bunch of kids on these, because an accident could happen. It could be very dangerous for the officers or, of course, for the people that you're trying to track down. So how do you engage with these groups? It's
actually an excellent question, and that's why I really I loved that the mayor had that e-bike working group. That was an opportunity for me to talk to council members, EMS, HFD, HBL was there, DTS, DOT, right? We had everybody at the table. It was really a good opportunity for them, and that was one of the questions that they came up with. Why aren't you guys doing more about these e-bikes and these e-motorcycles? Why aren't you stopping them? You see them doing the wheelie. So when I was the commander of Waikele, just in 2023 and early 2024, that was probably one of the biggest calls I was getting, and it was, hey, I just saw your officers. This kid is popping a wheelie right in front of the substation. Your officer did absolutely nothing. He just drove right by. So what are you going to do about it? And it was odd, because I ended up doing research and looking. And one, I actually commended the officer for making a good decision. They're baiting us in some cases, right? Where they're popping the wheelie, they're sticking finger, they're doing something that's trying to be like, hey, chase me, right? We don't want to engage in a pursuit in a very high volume populated area, a lot of traffic. Just think of the risk, right? So think of it from that young officer's mind where, yeah, contempt of cop, I want to stop you, I'm going to give you a citation, you can't do that, that's dangerous. Okay, great. Okay, what's the risk? All right, well, now, is my vehicle going to be able to maneuver through this traffic to be able to keep up with you or stop you? The answer is probably no. Two, if I trip my siren and I turn my lights on and the individual's in the middle of his wheelie and he falls and gets hurt, are they going to blame us and say we caused that collision, right? If we do engage into a pursuit and they're operating at a high speed and this rider is riding beyond their capabilities, they lose control, go into a tourist, a pedestrian, a resident, a worker, you name it, and somebody loses their life because we were chasing them. Right now it's litigation to the city, for the officer. Was it worth it to stop that individual for that wheelie right then, right there? And in the one case where I was hearing it from a community member, my officer was actually on his way to a robbery. So it was, you have to weigh it out, right? Am I gonna go to this violent crime that's occurring to save somebody, or do I stop for a wheelie, right? So just because you don't see us stop the individual right then and there, doesn't mean we didn't, right? You go back and you look, that we made the news, right? Oh, HPD cracking down on e-bikes. It wasn't an e-bike, it was Surons, but we did. We had several operations. We arrested 6 individuals in one night. 2 of them were 13-year-olds, right? No license. We got them for reckless driving. They were popping wheelies. We were using the current state laws to address the issue. And then you get the opposite side of the community, where people call and they say things like, why are you picking on these poor kids for riding e-bikes? They're just having fun. So it's difficult being in the middle of that, but ultimately, we just care about safety. That's really all we care about. Right? So yeah, we're maybe not going to stop you right then and there because of the situation or the environment we're in, but we do catch you just a little bit later in a place maybe where it's not so populated.
13, I mean, how can a 13-year-old afford a device like that?
I'm pretty sure the parents paid for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to add, especially for the Eva Beach example and some other things, there's clearly a desire to be out on our streets having fun. I fully recognize that. As Major said, there's a time and place for that. Another bill I'd love to highlight that unfortunately didn't make it all the way through, but hopefully will be reintroduced, was an open streets bill. This is something that we saw even during COVID when we worked with the mayor's office to close down Kalakaua in Waikiki when it was very quiet, and had it open to everybody but cars, if you will. People walking, people biking. And I'd love to see more of those around our islands, and where for an afternoon on the weekend or something where it's not unnecessarily disruptive, but it gives people an opportunity to come out, enjoy our roads for different reasons than driving, and where you can have a safe place where you're not in traffic, to enjoy a bike ride, to enjoy an electric bike ride, to walk, those types of things.
Yeah, to that point, Dale from Kahuku says, would building a racetrack where cars and e-bikes can go race help the problem on the streets? Councilmember, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I have heard that from a lot in the community, and you know, the idea that having a place to go provides an outlet. I mean, of course, I think we know we're always going to have folks that are going to race or going to speed. The laws that we pass, like I said, they're a tool in the toolkit. You know, HPD, we know they're responding when they need to, and they're prioritizing, and they're responding based on like the highest emergency and the public safety, right? Of course, the education is a part of it. You know, I'm definitely open to having a racetrack just from the feedback, and I know the city administration has been working on one and talking about it, so it's in progress. But I wouldn't say it's a cure-all. Like, I think all these issues we're talking about, they're complex, right? And they overlap. Like every political issue, every city, state, federal issue. And so we really have to tackle it from every angle, right?
And I think a part of that, when we talk about speeding, is that there was a bill we also passed from the Pro City Senator Elefante, that if you have a subsequent excessive speeding charge, 80 miles over, 30 miles over posted, at the third and subsequent offenses, your vehicle can be subject to forfeiture, right? It's a misdemeanor, mandatory 90-day jail sentence. But it goes back to, I want to say, we have it in HRS. If an officer is asking you to pull over, if you're evading pursuit, it's a Class C felony. But obviously, it's not our viewers at home. I'm hoping it's not our viewers at home.
And I think this is going to go back to what you were saying about building the foundation. Someone who's watching us on YouTube tonight says, why can't we ban throttles? I don't see a reason to allow them.
I go back to, I think it's just, I had to learn a lot because I represent a district where we're very car-centric, right? But I also have to understand what we don't want in Nānākuli, maybe something the Urban Core of Honolulu that likes, and even parts of like Kauai. And largely, you don't want to make legislation that hurts or inhibits a lot of things. But I go back to, like, hopefully we adopted a resolution in the committee requesting the county to look at a summer streets program more appropriate in our urban corridor that can do this activity. But I go back to what I will say again tonight is that we have the foundation to allow us to expand, give us the time. And I think that's why we put that setback of 6 months to allow the counties to adopt the rules. So how they're going to enforce this come 2026 with the selling, the distributing, and the labeling requirements.
Lavinia has a question. Do the new laws make it easier for prosecutors to throw the book at violators? How many chances do you get before losing your bike or spending a night in jail?
Well, that's terrific because it is difficult. Current state law does make it very difficult for our prosecutors, but it also makes it difficult for the judiciary to try and figure out, are we actually going to hold someone accountable for this, because the laws currently are confusing. Again, I think Rep. Kila keeps nailing it. This is the framework we need so that we have the language. I think it's going to make everyone's job easier. The parent, who's actually a consumer, the rider, who's actually going to be riding these devices, is going to know what's legal, what's illegal, where they can and cannot operate them. The police, it's much easier for us to enforce the laws because the laws are very clear, the definitions are there, we know what we're dealing with, we can explain it to people clearly. I mean, I still hear today with the current state law, officers like misinterpreting or explaining it differently, right? And then there's confusion. So I think this is going to be exactly what we need. Then you take it to the next step. Prosecutors, it's easy to interpret. Definitions are there. Judiciary, right? They're able to make a decision based on a clear law. So I think overall, yes, 100%. It's going to be a lot easier for all of us to work through the prosecution process.
Okay, Stephen Honolulu has a question, and you know we've been focusing a lot on the negatives and the risks, but his point is about the recent climate settlement and how e-bikes could help reduce carbon emissions. I mean, we've been focusing a lot on the dangers of these vehicles, but you had brought up earlier that these could be safe alternatives, a good way to get around and not make much of an impact. Of course,
yeah. So the Navahine settlement from HDOT basically states that we need to do more with regarding sustainable transportation and meeting our greenhouse gas emission goals. E-bikes are an amazing, sustainable, low impact, affordable way of getting around. So I do think, a lot of this definition was around protecting what is an electric bike and hopefully, pushing some of the stuff that's been making these headlines. I do think it's also a new technology. So we're all kind of enamored by it a little bit. There's been a new crash or something like that will really catch our attention. Where, as Major hinted to earlier, like these are not inherently dangerous devices. There's a lot more people using them. I think we're also seeing a rise in fatalities and other things on our roads in general. So we really need to focus on the safety there. But e-bikes can be, and bicycles in general, if I can, stump a little bit, bicycles can be a solution to so many of our complex problems, especially the things that we face here, the affordability, the sustainability, those types of pieces that we want to make sure that those positives outweigh the negatives.
And to those positives, we did have a bill this year that didn't make it out of conference that would have appropriated almost $2 million for a 3-year program to allow folks who qualify and need assistance to actually purchase an electric bike. And this is the second year of trying to do that because we obviously know the barriers to entrance is obviously sometimes just the affordability part. And we want more people to use these devices, but it's going back to how we're going to fund it. And largely with federal things looming over our head, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, and we all need to be on the road together, right? Can you tell us how many accidents involve these vehicles? Are you tracking these separately?
Yes. So from 2021, when we had our first, that's when we began tracking the statistics related to fatal and critical collisions. So if you if you just say e-bike, and we use the class 1, 2, and 3, you're looking at, it basically is about 6 fatalities since 2021. It's about 2.5% of the total fatality count. If you lump in all the devices, whether it's Surons, the unicycles, the e-bikes, right? You put those all together, it's 3.5% of the total fatality count. So you're looking at 9. Traditional bicyclists are 7%, double, right, of what we had for lumping all of them together. Now, and I think Travis nailed it when he was talking about, like, it's fatalities overall are on the rise, right? We had 28 already this year. We're on course to set a record that we don't want to have. We don't want this record. We have to do better, and it have to do better in every category, not just e-bikes, not just anything else. But I think what I would like to try and focus on also is pedestrian. Like, that's the highest category since 2021, 30%. Like, they lead all categories, even over vehicle occupants, right? So, ultimately, it's everybody's single responsibility. I think Councilmember mentioned about summer times coming up, deadliest days. That's a national trend. Luckily, in Hawaii, we haven't seen the same significant spike during those deadliest 100 days. But I think this is a good opportunity for us to make it the safest 100 days, right? So from Memorial Day to Labor Day, this is a good opportunity. It's graduation season coming up. Do a quick plug for all the viewers. Like, if you have kids that are going to graduate, or you're a parent or grandparent or whatever, this is a momentous occasion. Graduation is big. You should celebrate, have fun, have a great time, but do it responsibly. Be safe. Set up a ride share. Designated drivers. Do something to prevent you from getting behind the wheel impaired, especially during the holiday or during the graduation season.
Yeah, that is such a good reminder. I mean, 30% being pedestrians. I know that's a little bit of a sort of left turn here, but can you tell us briefly, what do you attribute that to? Is it drivers not being aware of pedestrians, pedestrians not being aware of their own surroundings? Like, where is that coming from? That is enormous.
It is, and it's alarming. So it's, the other thing is motorcycle riders, which would take another whole hour, but pedestrians, we see a combination of factors, right? So from the pedestrian side, the things that we're seeing is they are crossing against the red palm, right? As soon as the red palm starts flashing with the countdown doesn't mean, hey, just letting you know how much more time you have to enter.
Run.
No, exactly. So once the red palm starts flashing, do not enter the crosswalk. It is illegal to do so. You're also messing up traffic, and then you're now becoming unpredictable for drivers because they're expecting you're going to follow the law as a pedestrian and not enter the crosswalk. They're making their right-hand turn, but you dart out and you get hit, right? So we have that. We have people not crossing in crosswalks, not using the marked crosswalks, not crossing where it's lit or where there's a signal. They're wearing dark clothing. They're walking in the roadway. We've had people laying in the roadway. So there's a lot of things that we can do better as pedestrians, but also on the vehicle side, the driver side, pay attention, put the phone away, don't be distracted. It's simple, right? Distraction is probably the most underreported factor in a lot of these collisions. And there's 3 types of of distraction, sorry to steal the show on this one, but, and the acronym is MVC, right? And it's manual, so it's anytime you're taking your hands off the wheel. Visual, you're taking your eyes off the road. Or cognitive, you're not paying attention. You had a fight today, you had a bad day at work, you're having a conversation. So cell phone is the deadliest of all of them because you're actually hitting all three of those, right? You're getting MVC, and ironically, MVC also stands for motor vehicle collision. So if you are distracted, you're going to lead to that. So as a driver, just not impaired, don't be distracted, and slow down, watch out for pedestrians.
Yeah, all good reminders. Okay, let's get back to bikes now. Henry has a question, and you did bring up insurance, so I'm curious about this. Would it be possible to mandate a no-fault insurance like with vehicles?
You could, but anytime, I just want to go back, how complicated no-fault insurance works is it's literally its own separate bill. But when you talk to insurers in Hawaii, they don't have the framework right now, even if they wanted to insure these e-bikes. And nationally, there are some states that have built out that framework, but I go back to when you look at the concept of insurance, the pool you generate has to sustain the pool you're serving. If you're only going to provide insurance for the 5 bikes, there's no way that they're going to move it forward. Larger states obviously have much more pool to pull it from. But again, to do the no-fault insurance and then try to justify who was at fault is going to be super hard.
Yeah, is insurance appropriate for these kinds of devices?
Yeah, so I think this depends on what you're trying to insure. Obviously, the likelihood of somebody in a vehicle to cause damage to others or even themselves is likely higher than somebody on a bicycle. So of course you can get insurance to either cover damage to the bicycle or damage to others, but it's definitely not a common enough place. Nor do I actually think it's truly appropriate at this point, more looking at like motor vehicle. And a lot of times that coverage or your homeowner's coverage will extend to other pieces as well.
Okay, I do want to go back to these other vehicles, the unicycles and the scooters, and then there's scooters that are sort of like in these ride share situations. What governs that? I mean, what's responsible for that? Let's start with you.
Well, so
like if you see one of those on the road and they're on the sidewalk or they're in a bike lane, like are they allowed to be there?
No, well, so that's why right now it's confusing for everyone, right? So what is allowed and where it's allowed, there's grays, right? And then there's contradictions between city and state. And state is going to supersede city, right? When there's two laws that are both, right? If we say in the city, we're saying, hey, you have to be 16 to operate, but the state says, no, you can be 15 if you want, right? There's confusion, and then how are we going to prosecute that, right? So we say, oh, we're going to use the city law, and then it gets to court and say, well, the state law says this, right? So, like I mean, I don't know, I don't want to beat the dead horse here, but it really is. This is the framework we need to make it all clear, so that it's easy for officers when we see one of these devices. If it's not a class 1, 2, or 3, it's not labeled, it's not one of these high-speed electric devices, this is an out-of-class device or an electric micro-mobility device, and then that's the language we need, that we can go to our council member and say, hey, can we get some language for that here on Oahu? Like, this is what we think, right? And then we can make that RO that's going to actually allow us to enforce laws against those types of devices.
So electric micro-mobility devices are next, right?
And it's a definition.
If you're a Capitol watcher, it's on page 11 of HB 958, line 3. Electric micromobility device means a device weighing no more than 75 pounds that is fully or partially motorized, used for personal transportation such as one-wheels, electric skateboards. Electric micromobility device does not include electric bicycles or electric foot scooters.
And where do these fall in all of this?
This is actually now codifying what it is and what it's not, because now with the definitions that we adopted and the expansion for under Chapter 91 for them to expand the rulemaking on the counties, this was, I don't want to say the silver bullet, but this is giving them the keys to move forward what they need to do. Because this is where I will take fault, is that the county had to try to do something without the legislature in session. So coming to this session, we need to give them everything possible to move forward. So I mean, this is my plea, right, to Governor, sign it as soon as you can so that they can start getting to work. Because, I mean, it's going to be a crazy next couple of months, because it's not just the regulations I go back to. We're doing monstrous around the distribution. And it's not going to happen overnight, and we only have so much time to get it together.
Okay, so electric micromobility devices, do you expect us to do something about those next?
I think it's a conversation we're going to have, right? And I think a part of the struggle, too, is as we're looking at all these different devices, and kind of like we talked about, where are each of them appropriately placed? I think there's a lot of infrastructure limitations. I mean, you just look at our district, right? I mean, very narrow shoulders in some places. I mean, we see some places, North Shore, but even in town, these amazing bike lanes with parking. And so really it's figuring out what the good fit is that allows folks in the community to navigate, get along with their life, get to work, get to school, using the device that's accessible to them, but then is still safe for the community. And so ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to, is figuring out where is it safe for each of these devices to operate, right? And I think coming back to what we're talking about, and what I love about this bill, right, is we're moving in this direction of identifying what devices we're restricting, and and then from there moving into how we can register them. Obviously there's complications with the insurance, but this isn't, if we look at other communities globally, like there's e-bikes are, taking off, right? And like we talked about sustainability wise, like Travis was talking about, where you see success are places where there's a clear-cut line, right? So we have a speed limit or a wattage or whatever it is. Say some communities it's 15 miles per hour, 25 kilometers per hour, right? And then above that, everything's regulated, licensed, treated like a bigger device. And then they have the infrastructure, right? To have everybody in their safe space, right? And so that's why the work we're doing at the city on sidewalk improvements and bike lanes and even the road improvements is so important.
What are your thoughts on those devices? I mean, as a bicyclist, are those something that you embrace, or it seems like a mixed bag?
Yeah, I think for the longest time it was, walking, biking, and driving, or taking the bus. So there was kind of 3 different modes. And now we're playing a little bit of catch up of all this new technology that's come out there. And the micro mobility devices and getting around outside of a vehicle has gotten complicated. There's a lot of different pieces. And I think it comes back to responsible use of those. It's anybody can drive recklessly, anybody can ride a bicycle recklessly, but if we do it responsibly and share the road together, that's probably fine. So I think we're not going to see these things go away, but I think this bill especially defines them, and then hopefully we can work at the various county levels to say, where do those now defined devices belong? Are they on the sidewalk? Are they in the bike lane? Are they more of a vehicle? So I think that'll be the next step.
Yeah, and now it's really up to the users to figure out where's my vehicle place in this framework. I mean, what would you say to people who are watching, who are trying to figure out, okay, how do I make sure I'm in compliance with all of this?
Well, as soon as the law is passed, a lot of PSAs are going to be coming out, and we'll tell you exactly where everything belongs. But as far as like where it's going to be operable or where you're able to operate it, that's where we work with our council to say, hey, this is what's best for Oahu. It might not be what's best for Big Island. It might not be what's best for Maui, right? So it gives the opportunity. The opportunities are endless for what we can start saying, okay, it's good here, but it's not good here. Put up the signage, put up the signage and let people know where it's operable.
Jimmy from Palolo has one, and I think I know the answer, but let's hear it from you, sir. Is it illegal for an e-bike and a moped to have 2 riders?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll expand on the
Mopeds or no?
e-bike side of things.
Please.
The definitions say that you can have as many riders as it is equipped to have. So like a tandem bike can have 2
Yeah,
people,
it would
or a
need- it would
cargo
need the
bike
additional
might have a
seat.
seat on the back. So when it's equipped, yes, but definitely not the what.
Don't throw your friend on the back.
Yeah, I can't sit on the handlebar or something like that. Yeah,
We've had a lot of
definitely
those crashes lately where we had people packing on these high-speed electric devices. They get into a crash and both individuals are injured. We've seen more and more where they're packing.
Wow, okay. I'm imagining a big public safety campaign coming up.
Well, can I just say, like, my favorite one, and I will give the council this credit, is Hamas wear helmets. Right? But that like sticks because you're talking to the people that are these operators. They're Gen Z. I don't know why there's this negative connotation with helmets, but you still want Hama, you can wear a helmet. But how do we meet people where they're at? But that was another barrier with the bill, right? Is that in its original intent, we had an appropriation for a public campaign, but as we saw the session evolve, bills with money were becoming hard to pass, so we had to remove the money part from the bill. So I'm going to put it out there now, a large part of it is going to take money from the county, our private orgs, our public orgs to put forth a really comprehensive public campaign, which I know we can do.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left, but I do want to answer, if you could answer Nadine's question here. We hear a lot of news about injuries people suffer in e-bike crashes, but no details about the injuries themselves. Maybe if people knew what kind of injuries are possible, they would take the issue more seriously. We've heard about the fatalities, but you don't necessarily need to suffer a fatality to be severely hurt.
Correct. So a lot of the injuries are head injuries where they're not wearing helmets. But even with motorcycles, right? You can be wearing your helmet, but if you're traveling excessively at a high speed, not much is going to save you, right? I'm from the from the school of thought that I would love to do PSAs where we actually show you how bad it can be. I've been to hundreds of fatalities where I've seen some horrific things that I can't unsee. But not that I want to show everybody that, but I think that's what's going to change your outlook. That's what's going to change your perception, right? Until you see the tragedy, you see it affects so many people, not just the person riding, the person who hit that person, your family members, your friends, your coworkers. It's just a domino effect, and it affects a lot of people. So the injuries it can range anywhere from you have a broken bone, but all the way up to head trauma that you'll probably never heal from.
Wow, wow. I want to give you a last word on this. Where do we go from here? What do you hope happens in light of all the things we've talked about tonight?
Yeah, so first I hope the governor, like you said, signs this House Bill 958 rapidly, because we've got a lot of work to do from that great foundation. And I think, you know, May is Bike Month, and June 3rd is World Bicycle Day. So hopefully it's good inspiration for people to get out on a bike, come to one of our free workshops, learn how to ride a bike, learn how to fix a flat tire, get out there, have an affordable, fun, sustainable way to get around.
Okay, thank you all for being here tonight. What a great conversation. Mahalo for you for joining us tonight. Of course, we do thank our guests, Representative Darius Kila and Major James Slayter from HPD, and Councilmember Matt Weyer and Travis Counsell from the Hawaii Bicycling League. Next week, right here on Insights, from phone calls and texts to email and social media, scammers are using every tool available to find new victims. What do you need to know to stay scam smart? Please do join us then. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi. Aloha.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii